Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. Joining us is Marc Betesh, who's the CEO of Visual Lease. We're going to take a look at how COVID-19 is impacting commercial lease agreements and what that might look like on the other side of coronavirus as the move toward remote working increases. Marc, it's great to have you with us. And have you ever seen real estate leases impacted in the past that's comparable with COVID-19 and how abruptly the market came to halt?
Never like this. This is the first time that I've ever seen, and I've been around a few years. This is the first time I've ever seen anything grind to a halt the way it did this time. Everything basically came to a halt within probably 10 days, starting mid-March, and by the end of March, everything was basically in lockdown.
What has been the impact on real estate leases?
Well, right now, nothing has changed. The leases are still in effect. Everything is still the way it was. I think everyone's waiting to see how long this really lasts and whether it's if it's 1 month or 2 months or 6 months. The impact on leases is going to be profound if the longer it lasts. If tenants don't pay their rents, and most of them are, and we've done some surveys of our client base. Most of them are paying their rent or paying most of their rents. But as the COVID-19 pandemic impacts business in general and causes companies to slow down or shut down, it's going to have a fairly significant impact in the markets. Tenants are not going to pay their rents, which means that landlords aren't going to have the revenue to pay their mortgages. And that's going to have a cascading effect throughout the economy.
What should businesses be keeping track of? I would imagine when many of these leases are signed, I'm not sure many people had the foresight to think that, we'll use New York City as an example where we're based, that we'd come to a virtual shutdown.
Every lease has a number of components, some more important than others, but every lease and every commercial lease has between 50 and 100 key components that have to be tracked. When things like COVID-19 come into play, causing disruption the way it has, you need to know about all of your default provisions. Certainly, if you don't pay your rent, what happens? If the landlord doesn't provide you access to your space, what happens? What are what's called force majeure clauses, which are clauses that excuse certain behaviors? How do they impact? How are the rents going to be impacted? If landlords are going to give you relief in the form of free rent, or in the form of free rent, or in the form of deferred rent, how are you going to track that? How do you know how that gets input into your system to make sure that you're calculating all your rents properly? And now with lease accounting in effect, which is a new set of rules that pertain to treating your leased assets as though they are owned, that all has to be redone and recalculated based upon the concessions that are being given to tenants by landlords.
So how do you plan for the future and prepare for the new leasing accounting standards?
You have to have your arms around your leases. Large companies have a lot of leases, and it's very difficult unless you have all of your leases, all of your documents, all of the rents and additional rents all tracked together. So there are two aspects of this. The first is just having control of the transactions themselves. What we've seen with a lot of companies is that they know they have leases. The leases are in a drawer someplace. They know they have, or they're in a file folder someplace, but nobody is really examining them. And if you start to try to control them, you realize that you're missing signed documents, you're missing amendments, you're missing letter agreements. All of that has to be assembled and aggregated together in one central place. Someone has to read all that to know what your rights and obligations are, right? You don't know how much rent you have to pay unless you read all the leases and all the amendments, because it cascades over time. Each lease goes into the amendment, into the Second Amendment, Third Amendment. You have to be able to understand where you are today by seeing where you started and how you've changed over time. So once you do that, and you have everything assembled in one place, you need a place to put it, which is what our system does. It houses all that information, keeps it organized. And then you have to run all the financial calculations for lease accounting. And the lease accounting calculations are taking all of the rents, like on each individual lease, taking the rents over time, bringing it to what they call net present value, to figure out how much would it be if you were to have purchased the right to use that space instead of leasing it. And that's a bunch of calculations that need to be done, and then need to be plotted out over time. And all that goes into your financial statements. So the process is first organizing, second reading, third inputting, and fourth doing the calculations. And each one of those things is, as with everything, has 20, 30 steps to them.
All right. So on the other side of COVID-19, what do you think the market's going to look like? How could businesses and also the commercial leasing part of it be impacted by remote working, which looks like it could be a trend for some time?
I think the markets are going to go through a period of adjustment. I think that everyone, all of us who are working from home, except for those that always work from home, those of us that are newly working from home are realizing that it's not so bad, that you can actually get quite a bit of work done. In some cases, more work at home than you got done in the office. And so you're going to see a change in the level of demand, because there isn't going to be the same level of need to have office space. On the other hand, people that are in the office are going to want to have greater social distancing. So whereas the density before may have been at a certain level, now the density is going to be lighter, which would require you to take more space. So you have these two countervailing forces going on. I'm not quite sure how it's going to shake out. I suspect that at the end of the day, people are going to want to go back to the office. They like the camaraderie. They like the synergy that gets created. And I think that real estate will come back, albeit a bit more slowly than we would have expected.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. It was kind of fun working from home in sweats for a minute, but definitely missing the camaraderie of my teammates and just being around our clients and our partners. Certainly missing that. Is this comparable to the way it was after 9/11, where it took people some time to get back into the city? Many folks moved away from the city because of 9/11. I lived in the city at that time, and I remember seeing the demographic shift, certainly with the downtown area.
Right.
Does this feel any different? This feels like it's a little bit bigger than that, because 9/11 was identifiable. There really isn't no end in sight with what's happening at the moment.
Well, you have two aspects of it. 9/11 was very localized. I mean, obviously, when 9/11 happened, everybody was afraid. We waited for the other shoe to drop. We didn't know if there was going to be another attack someplace, but that quickly dissipated. So it was very localized to the areas where the attack was, the attacks were, and secondly, it was an identifiable finite event. This right now, and we don't know what it's going to look like a month or two from now, but right now is a big question mark. We don't know what the future holds. We don't know how long this is going to last, and the uncertainty is the problem. You know, if we knew that that by July 1 everything was back to normal, we could plan for that, but we don't know. We don't know if it's going to be May 1 or June 1 or September 1 or next January. We don't know. And the uncertainty is what's unsettling the markets. I think if you watch the markets themselves, you can see the level of confidence ebbing and flowing. But the truth is, nobody really knows. And so we are all a little bit uncertain and a little bit frightened. I think you're going to see differences based upon the relative level of conservatism in predicting market volatility.
All right, Mark, great insight. Thank you so much for joining us on Trade Talks.
You're quite welcome. Thank you.
All right. And thank you for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.